So this is the verse, which is a salutation to the mother of all the Buddhas, the Prajnaparamita, which is inexpressible, ineffable, and beyond conception. And then salutation verses from Mula Madhyamaka Karika and Abhisamaya Alamkara by Acharya Maitreya and Lord Acharya Nagarjuna and Lord Chancellor. Homage to the Gautama who moved by his compassion toward the sacred Dharma to rid us of all misconceived views. So yesterday we did a general introduction to the teaching of the Buddha. And today we'll go through the book, A Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. Of course, we'll not be able to have a teaching on the entire book, word by word, verse by verse, but so regarding the teaching that came from the Buddha's mouth, we don't have any separation between what is known as agamas or commentarial explanations or guided explanations separately. The Buddha himself has said, "You are your own master, and therefore your pain and pleasure are in your hands." And the Buddha said, not committing any evil, cultivating a wealth of virtue, and completely taming your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So the main important thing is to discipline your mind. And in the process of taming or disciplining one's mind, there are many ways or many degrees of levels that you can develop. So you go through the process of averting the attachment to this life and the next lives, and then developing the sense of wishing to achieve liberation and also omniscience in a gradual manner. And so we all want peace of mind. And when you have a peace of mind within, then you will not cause harm to others. Non-violence will not happen. And therefore, it is very important to discipline and control your mind. It's not only about religion as such. It's not a religious matter, but there are many problems and troubles that human beings ourselves have created in the world. And so in order to overcome them or avoid them, we need to develop a peace of mind, or peaceful mind. So as I said yesterday, all religions teach love and compassion, and Buddhism also teaches the same message, to discipline one's mind, to control one's mind. So this book, A Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, is one of the most important texts for disciplining our mind. So regarding myself, in 1967, I received a commentarial guided teaching on this text from the Kinori master, Kunalama Tenzin Gyaltsen Rinpoche. First, I received, when I saw his own writing, a praise to Bodhicitta, and then I received his teaching on it, and then I received teaching on the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life in 1967. So Kuno Lama Rinpoche Tenzin Gyatso himself told me that it would be very beneficial if you could teach these texts often. So with regard to this commentarial teaching on this text, it had become rare in the central part of Tibet. And after coming to exile, since I received teaching from him, I have taught this many times, and I take it with me all the time and also read it again and again. And also, Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental verses of Wisdom of the Middle Way by Nagarjuna. So these texts are very helpful to me. And also the fundamental verses of the Middle Way by Master Nagarjuna also. So these two texts could be recognized as two of the most important texts from amongst the translations that are in Tibetan of the exegetical treatises of Indian masters. So if these children could get the book, so this is asking, it would be good. So whether you practice a religion or not, you should be able to develop and cultivate love and compassion by using your own religious philosophical ideas and concepts. So religion is not about building a temple and worshipping in it. Of course, it's just a part of one's religious practice. But the most important thing is to discipline and control your mind. Whether you're a Buddhist, practitioner of Buddhism or Jainism or other non-Buddhist traditions, which are many in number, the different religious traditions. So if the practitioners or followers could pay attention to discipline and control one's mind and learn to do so. So, in other words, followers of Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and so forth should not only visit their temples or mosque or church, but on a daily basis try to integrate their teachings within themselves to discipline their mind, to control their mind, so that they could actually turn their mind or transform it. So otherwise, whether you're a Buddhist or non-Buddhist practitioners or followers, I mean, if the Dharma may not serve its purpose. So it's very important to whichever religion you are following, you should try to integrate the teaching within yourself to transform your mind. So I'll not give a reading transmission of the text as such. I'll not be able to finish it. And so the title of the text in Sanskrit, Bodhisattva Charya Avatara, and then in Tibetan, and so in the translation of the Buddhist texts into Tibetan, we have this, there's always in the beginning, Gyagarketu, which means in the language of India. Maybe some of the translations may give in the language of China or something, but India is considered as the Arya Bhumi, the land of the noble ones. So it seems that originally the spiritual tradition, religious tradition, originated in India during the last 4th 3, 4, 5,000 years ago. So to go through the text, there's a salutation to Manjughosha. So reverently bowing to the Suggatas who are endowed with the Dharmakaya to give it the children and all who are worthy of veneration, I shall concisely present a guide to the discipline of the children of Suggatas in accordance with the scriptures. So this is the verse of salutation. So with regard to the Dharma, it refers to the Dharmakaya, refers to the Buddha's enlightened mind and the qualities related with this, such as true cessation and overcoming of all defilements. And then the children here refers to the disciples of the Buddha, and mainly referring to the Bodhisattvas. And also it could refer to the on their side those of the Shravakas and Pajaka Buddhas and those worthy of veneration. And I shall concisely present the guide to the discipline of the children. So here I shall explain how to engage in the vows of the Buddha's children, the meaning of which I have condensed in accordance with the scriptures. So scriptures here refers to scripture like Avatamsaka Sutra and so forth. And then if you ask, isn't there the fault of repetition of what is already taught in the scriptures? And the author here says, no, there shouldn't be repetition. This shouldn't be a repetition because I have written this text in a condensed manner in accordance with the sutra, the scriptures. So Master Shantideva, who was a great scholar of the 3 collections of the teachings, which contained the Abhidhamma texts of in the Pali, as well as in the Sanskrit tradition, the Abhidhamma texts in the Sanskrit tradition, which are considered as a higher Abhidharma. So, regarding the profound and the vast teachings, which actually make up the whole path to Buddhahood, explained on the basis of reasoning, is very unique. In Ratnavali by Nagarjuna, it teaches that of equaling and exchanging self and others for cultivating bodhicitta, but with regard to using a whole lot of reasoning to do so, you find it very elaborately in the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. So, of course, the texts by Nagarjuna and so forth also teach those of the practice of patience and how to counter one's anger and so forth. But in this particular book, there is very elaborate reasoning given as to how to counter one's anger and develop patience, cultivate patience. And then the text says there's nothing here that has not been explained before. So regarding the content, there may not be anything new. And then I have no skill in the art of rhetoric. Therefore, lacking any intention to benefit others, So in the Sanskrit version it is said, therefore, though lacking in intention to benefit others, I write this in order to acquaint it to my mind. So similarly, it is given in the salutation verse of Pramana Vartika Karika by Master Dharmakirti. Where he also says that I have no intention to, though I have no intention to benefit others. So I write this in order to acquaint it to my mind. So this is written for myself to familiarize my mind with this. And it says, for due to acquaintance with what is wholesome, the force of my faith may. So though I have no intention to benefit others, although it may help some who might come across this text, and the Master Shantideva says here, I write this in order to acquaint it to my mind. So we do talk about good and bad karmas. So karmas are threefold: physical, verbal, and mental. So the first two are ordinary, whereas the third one is the most important. So if you have a virtuous state of mind, a wholesome state of mind, then the physical and verbal actions also would be good, wholesome. Whereas if your mind is filled with jealousy, sense of competition, and pride or arrogance, then your verbal actions will also become negative. So the most important thing is your mind. And therefore it's important to turn your mind towards the Dharma, to have a virtuous state of mind, in other words. As the text says, this leisure and endowment are very hard to find. In verse number 4, we as human beings have this marvelous intelligence with which we can actually think about the short and long-term goodness. We can actually distinguish between what is the long-term benefit for us and what's a short-term benefit and what's not good for us in the long and short term. So, by using our intelligence, what we should do is try to cultivate those actions which bring about happiness and decrease or avoid those which bring about unhappiness or suffering. So if you have a wholesome state of mind, then your actions of body and voice would also be virtuous or wholesome. So if you have faith, for example, a faithful state of mind, then your verbal recitations of prayers and also physical practices of wholesome practices will also become good. Buddhism in general, and particularly the Sanskrit tradition, is not only about mere faith, but using reason and logic. So this Nalanda tradition of Buddhism is about using this human intelligence and this human to the fullest. For example, if you see the disadvantage of hatred, then you will be able to actually restrain yourself. So otherwise, what we see usually is anger or hatred is something that is needed for our livelihood. So what anger or hatred does is expel others from oneself, and whereas attachment or desire kind of attracts others towards yourself. And so it's because of that, it seems it is something needed. And so the Nalanda tradition is unique in the sense of using logic and reason to understand the teaching of the Buddha, and it is the best tradition to understand the teaching of the Buddha well. We are not just being stubborn about this tradition, but if you even the scientists today, the modern scientists, are attracted to this tradition. And so in the salutation verse, it says Sugatas endowed with Dharmakaya. So with regard to the Sugatas or the Buddhas, in the Pali tradition, the historical Buddha Shakyamuni was born in the royal family, and then, as he was an ordinary being in the beginning, and then went through the practices of austerity and so forth, and became enlightened. And so there's no explanation of the Buddha in terms of the four Buddha bodies, which is found in the Sanskrit tradition. And so the historical Buddha according to the Sanskrit tradition, as Maitreya's Abhisamaya Alamkara says, was a supreme Nirmanakaya form of Buddha, which is to say he was an emanation, a supreme emanation body, which actually came from or emerged from that of the Sambhogakaya form of body. And so the Sambhogakaya form of the Buddha also arose from the Dharmakaya, the wisdom Dharmakaya, and the Dharmakaya, in turn, that wisdom Dharmakaya develops as the Buddha overcame all the defilements from his mind. And so from in order to understand what the Buddha is more precisely and in greater detail, we need to understand the four Buddha bodies. So like Svabhavikakaya is one, which is the total abandonment of all defilements. So when we talk about the development of the path to enlightenment, in which process you have to talk about overcoming all the mental afflictions or kleshas, and in great detail. So this particular text that we are going through, what it teaches us is to use this marvelous human intelligence that we have now in this human life So in this world, amongst all the sentient beings, there are 7 billion people on this earth who have obtained this human body. And then amongst them, it's very few who have attained a body, a human body, which is characterized by leisure and endowment. So what it shows is that this kind of human body, the precious human body, is very rare. And we may not, although we have attained this kind of human body now in this life, but because of our actions of body, speech and mind in this life, we may not attain this kind of human body again. So as the Tibetan proverb says, so look at this body that you have obtained if you want to know what kind of karma you have created in the past. So because of your good karma, you have attained a human life or human body in this life. But due to your wrongdoing, do not throw yourself into the abyss of lower realms in the next life. And so by using this kind of human body and human life intelligence, what we should know is our goal is to progress along the path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing and meditation, and culminating in that of Buddhahood. So you need to develop that of the bodhicitta and enter the path of accumulation, and then develop further into the path of preparation or application by developing this vipassana, the union of vipassana and shamatha, on observing or focused on emptiness, and then you develop further to that of the path of seeing, where you see emptiness directly, without any having to go through an image of emptiness in your mind as such, and then progress further towards the goal of enlightenment. So this is what this text teaches us. So this book, The Guide to Buddhist Way of Life, has 10 chapters. The first chapter shows the benefit of the bodhicitta, the spirit of enlightenment. So having cultivated some virtue, if you are able to actually understand what is the benefit of it, then you will have enthusiasm to further engage in the practice. When you see the qualities that can be developed through these, then you will have the aspiration to cultivate these practices. Isn't it? So yesterday we talked about that of true cessation, which is a state whereby you have completely pacified all the causes of suffering. So when you see that, then you grow enthusiasm, and then you would want to cultivate the path leading to that. Whereas if you are told to have fear in order to practice the path, and you may be able to do some practice, but then you will feel rather demoralized by thinking about the fear that is actually induced through the teaching. So I have a story to tell. I have an Indian friend who went to the Tibetan library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamsala, and in one teaching he heard about that of bodhicitta, thinking about the benefits of cherishing others over oneself and and so forth, compassion and so forth. And so he felt very inspired by the teaching in that class. Whereas on another occasion, when he attended this a class in the library, he heard about the different types of hell realms, and he said to me that the hot ones are too hot to bear, and the cold ones also similarly too cold to bear. And so we should not try to induce fear in order to practice the Dharma, but induce enthusiasm so that people would aspire to the path. So perhaps for some who may be of dull faculty, this kind of method may be helpful. But for those of intelligence, the followers following in the Dharma on the basis of intelligence and understanding, I mean, it's better to teach the practice of the path by inducing enthusiasm, seeing reason to do so. And then the next verse, next chapter, the chapter number 2, is that of the confession of wrongdoings. In order to develop the path, you need to purify your negativities. Therefore, this chapter is taught. And then there is the full acceptance of the awakening mind, or bodhicitta. And then in the practice of bodhicitta, you should be conscientious, and therefore, there's the 4th chapter on conscientiousness, and then the 5th chapter deals with regarding alertness, and then 6th chapter patience, 7th is enthusiasm or joyous effort, and then the 8th one is meditation, chapter on meditation, and then the 9th one is on wisdom. And then the 10th one is dedication. So this text does not have a separate chapter on morality as such, but in order to observe one's morality purely, or you have to show conscientiousness and good alertness, and therefore the 4th and 5th chapters are about conscientiousness and girding alertness to practice morality purely. Verse number 5 says just as all the Buddhas. Verse number 7 says all the Buddhas who have contemplated for many eons have seen it to be beneficial. So, for example, in the case of the historical Buddha Shakyamuni, since he developed genuine bodhicitta, he then engaged in the very difficult tasks of bodhisattvas and was able to become a fully enlightened being. And so bodhicitta is seen to be that factor which is beneficial for oneself and others. And so it says, for by it the limitless masses of beings will quickly attain the supreme state of bliss. Those who wish to destroy the many sorrows of their conditioned existence, those who wish all beings to experience a multitude of joy, and those who wish to experience much happiness should never forsake this awakening mind. And so Kunalama Rinpoche, the Kinori master Tenzin Gyaltsen Rinpoche, has also said, if you want happiness, cultivate bodhicitta. If you wish others to have happiness, cultivate bodhicitta. If you wish to have short-term and long-term benefits, good qualities and so forth, cultivate bodhicitta. And so when you have bodhicitta and the understanding of emptiness, you are able to counter your extreme self-centeredness, selfish attitude, and also grasping at some independent true existence of things. So when you develop this altruistic mind, which cherishes others over oneself, you will actually release yourself from the grip of the selfish attitude. And therefore, you have this sense of abandon. So in other words, even if you may have a very simulated kind of experience, or in other words, a sense of or an experience of bodhisattva which arises in you when you put some effort, so this will be the factor which will benefit yourself. And by being able to develop the antidote or the countermeasure to selfish attitude and that of the grasping at some true existence, then you'll see that you will lead a life which goes from bliss to bliss. So when you have a peace of mind, a joy and happiness like that, then you will have a true peaceful mind. And then you'll be able to make such a prayer which says, as long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too remain in order to free transmigratory beings. So you'll be able to destroy the many sorrows of cyclic existence and unfortunate lower rebirths. Then you'll be able to really have true happiness. And then this text also says, unless you are able to exchange your joy and happiness with the suffering of others, live alone, reaching Buddhahood, even in samsara, the cycle of existence, you'll not have happiness. So whatever profession you may be in, whether you are doctors or engineers or any other profession, I mean, when you have this sense of altruism, wishing to help others, benefit others more than one yourself, then you will really have happiness. You'll be able to give happiness to oneself and others. So as I quoted these lines, which says, if you are not able to exchange your joy and happiness with the suffering of others and so forth, likewise, if you remain selfish, you will never really have genuine happiness. So whether you are a believer, whether you believe in a religion or not, you are a human being. You are born as a human being here. If you remain selfish, you will always complain about others and oneself, that this, I'm not able to do this or accomplish this and that and so forth. All kinds of bad things. But whereas, if you are able to cherish others over oneself without selfishness, then you will really have happiness. And so, the essence of the benefit of bodhicitta, the spirit of enlightenment, is to have happiness and well-being for oneself and others. So verse number 12 says, all other virtues are like plantain trees, for after bearing fruit, they simply perish. So if you create a virtuous action for some goodness in this life, then when that goal is achieved, that's it. And also it is similar in the case of creating virtue for a higher rebirth in the next life. When you are born in the higher rebirth in the next life, then that's the end of that karma, end of the fruition. Whereas with bodhicitta, if you pray for the benefit of all sentient beings, may I attain Buddhahood, until all sentient beings are until the entire cycle of existence, samsara, ends, this kind of virtue will not end. And so, as long as space endures, to that extent, that this kind of virtue will also remain. Yet the perennial tree of awakening mind unceasingly bears fruit and thereby flourishes without end. So another translation says, just as a plantain tree decays upon losing its fruit, so does every other virtue wane. But the tree of the spirit of enlightenment perpetually bears fruit, does not decay, and only flourishes. In brief, the awakening mind should be understood to be two types: the mind that aspires to awaken and the mind that ventures to do so. So the aspiring bodhicitta, which arises through the practice and cultivation of love and compassion, and then you have that motivation to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So that is bodhicitta. So having developed that, then in order to reach that goal of Buddhahood, you need to actually train in the causes and conditions that bring about the goal of enlightenment. In other words, the Bodhisattva practices. And so with the motivation of bodhicitta, when you actually venture upon the Bodhisattva practices, that's the venturing bodhicitta. Although great fruits occur in verse number 17, occur in cyclic existence, from the mind that aspires to awaken, the uninterrupted flow of merit does not ensue, as it does with the venturing mind. And for those who have perfectly seized this mind, with the thought never to turn away from totally liberating the infinite forms of life, from that time hence, even while asleep or unconcerned, a force of merit equal to the sky will perpetually ensue. So having cultivated bodhicitta and then also pledged to engage in the bodhisattva practices, then you may be able to take the bodhisattva vows. So whenever we gather and whenever we say prayers, we also say the prayer in the beginning, prayer of refuge and bodhicitta, which says, I seek refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha until enlightenment is attained, and may I become a Buddha through the practice of the 6 perfections such as generosity and so forth. So whatever lines of prayers you may use, you may take refuge in the 3 jewels, the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, and also cultivate and develop bodhicitta within yourself. So I use this particular verse, which I recited earlier, quoted earlier, for motivating myself to engage in the bodhisattva practices, and I also use this to generate that of aspiring bodhicitta as well as taking bodhisattva vows. And so on a daily basis, if you could do this, recite this verse and to cultivate bodhicitta and also take bodhisattva vows, it would be very helpful and beneficial. So I thought that we would do a ceremony for Bodhisattva here, taking the. In order to do that, we first go through the accumulation of merit through the practice of what is known as 7-limb practice. So in the for this, we visualize the Buddha actually here in the space before you, and surrounded by Buddha, being surrounded by Maitreya, Manjushri, and Aryatara, and so forth. So these, in other words, the 8 Bodhisattva, close disciples of the Buddha. And then we have the human masters like Master Nagarjuna and his followers and disciples, as well as Master Asanga and his disciples and followers. In other words, the 17 Nalanda masters, the Panditas and adepts of the 17 scholar adepts. And then masters like adepts like Saraha and so forth, and then also the 16 Arahats who are well known. In other words, those great beings who have served the Dharma in the past, the Indian masters, and then also the lineage masters of Tibet and maybe China and so forth. Those who have served the Dharma and preserved the Dharma on the basis of their teachings and realization. So having this clear visualization of the Buddha and the other masters, lineage masters, so verse, His Holiness wants us to recite the verse, chapter 2. So when we come to chapter 3, we should stop at verse number, I think, 24. Chapter 3. Verse number 20, yeah, 22, yeah, verse number 22, at the end of verse number 22, we should stop there. So let us recite these 2 chapters, chapter number 2 and chapter number till the end of verse number 22. So So I'll just start reading the verse number, chapter 2, which says disclosure of wrongdoings or confession of wrongdoings. In order to seize that precious mind, I offer now to the Tathagatas, to the sacred Dharma, the stainless jewel, and to the disciples of Buddhas, the ocean of excellence, whatever flowers and fruits there are, and whatever kinds of medicine, whatever jewels exist in this world, and whatever clean, refreshing waters, likewise gem-encrusted mountains, forest groves, quiet and joyful places, heavenly tree bedecked with flowers and trees with fruit-laden branches, fragrances of the celestial realms, incense, wishing trees and jewel trees, uncultivated harvests, and all ornaments that are worthy of being offered, lakes and pools adorned with lotuses, and the beautiful cry of wild geese, everything unowned, within the limitless sphere of the space. creating these things in my mind, I offer them to the supreme beings, the Buddhas, and as well as their children or compassionate ones. Think kindly of me and accept these offerings of mine. Having no merit, I am destitute, and I have no other gifts to offer. O protector, you who think of helping others by your power, accept these for my sake. Eternally shall I offer all my bodies to the conquerors and their children. Please accept me, you supreme heroes. Respectfully shall I be your subject. By being completely under your care, I shall benefit all with no fears of a conditioned existence. I shall perfectly transcend my previous transgressions, and in the future shall commit no more. To very sweetly scented bathing chambers, where brilliantly sparkling crystal floors and exquisite pillars ablaze with gems, with canopies above aglow with pearls, I beseech the Tathagatas and their children to come and bathe their bodies from many jeweled vases, filled with water scented and enticing, to the accompaniment of music and song. Let me dry their bodies with incomparable cloth, clean and well anointed with scent, and then may I present these holy beings with fragrant garments of suitable colors. I adorn with manifold ornaments and various raiments, fine and smooth, the Arya Samandabhadra, Manjugosha, Avalokiteshvara, and all others. So these are the close disciples of the Buddha in the deity form. Just like polishing pure refined gold, I anoint the Buddha's form, which ablaze with light, with the choicest perfumes whose fragrance permeate 1,000,000,000 worlds. And to the highest objects of giving I offer beautiful, well-arranged garlands, as well as enchanting, sweet-smelling flowers such as lilies, jasmine, lotus flowers. Also I send forth clouds of incense whose sweet aroma steals away the mind, as well as celestial delicacies, including a variety of foods and drinks. I offer them jeweled lamps arranged on golden lotus buds. Upon land sprinkled with scented water, I scatter delicate flower petals. To those who have the nature of compassion, I offer palaces resounding with melodious hymns, exquisitely illuminated by hanging pearls and gems that adorn the infinite space. Eternally shall I offer to the Buddha's jeweled umbrellas with golden handles and exquisite ornaments embellished with the rims standing erect, their shapes beautiful to behold. And in addition, may our mass of offerings resounding with sweet and pleasing music like clouds that appease the misery of all, each remaining for as long as necessary. And may a continuous rain of flowers and precious gems descend upon the reliquaries and statues and upon all the jewels of Dharma. In the same way as Manjugosha and others have made offerings to the conquerors, similarly do I bestow gifts upon the Tathagatas, the protectors, their children, and all. I glorify the oceans of excellence with limitless verses of harmonious praise. Where may these clouds of gentle eulogy constantly ascend to their presence. With bodies as numerous as all atoms within this universe, I prostrate to all the Buddhas of the three times, the Dharma and Supreme Community. Likewise, I prostrate to all reliquaries, to the basis of awakening minds, to all learned abbots and masters, and to all noble practitioners. I seek refuge in all the Buddhas until I possess the essence of awakening. I seek refuge in the Dharma and in the assembly of Bodhisattvas. With folded hands I beseech the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who possess the great compassion and reside in all directions throughout the beginningless cycle of existence. In this life and in others, unknowingly I committed transgressions and ordered them to be done by others. Overwhelmed by the deceptions of ignorance, I rejoiced in what was done, but now seeing these mistakes, from my heart I confess them to the Buddhas. Whatever harmful actions of body, speech, and mind I have done in a disturbed mental state towards the three jewels of refuge, may my parents, my spiritual masters, and others, and all the grave wrongs done by me, so thoroughly vile and polluted with an abundance of faults, I openly declare to the guides of the world. But may well perish before all these transgressions. My transgressions have been purified, so please protect me in such a way as will swiftly and surely free me from them. The untrustworthy Lord of Death waits not for things to be done or undone, whether I am sick or healthy. This fleeting lifespan is unstable. Leaving all, I must depart alone. Yet through not having understood this, I committed various kinds of wrongdoings for the sake of my friends and foes. My foes will become nothing, my friends will become nothing, I too will become nothing likewise. All will become nothing. Just like a dream experience, whatever things I enjoy will become a memory. Whatever has passed will not be seen again. Even within this life, brief life, many friends and foes have passed, but whatever unbearable wrongdoing I committed for them remains ahead of me. Thereby, through not having realized that I shall suddenly vanish, I committed so much wrong out of ignorance, lust, and hate, remaining neither day or night. Life is always slipping by and never getting any longer. But why would death not come to one like me while I am lying in bed, although surrounded by my friends and relatives? The feeling of life being severed will be experienced by me alone. When seized by the messengers of death, what benefit will friends and relatives afford? My merit alone shall protect me then, but upon that I have never relied. O protectors, I, so unconcerned, unaware of such terror as this, accumulated a great deal of negative actions for the sake of this transient life. Petrified is the person today, being led to a torture chamber with a dry mouth and dreadful sunken eyes. His entire appearance is transfigured. What need to mention the tremendous despair when stricken with the disease of great panic, being clasped by the physical forms of the frightful messengers of death? Who can afford me real protection from this great horror? With terrified, bulging eyes agape, I shall search in every direction for refuge. Upon seeing no refuge anywhere, I shall become enveloped in gloom. If there should be no protection there, then what shall I be able to do? Therefore, I now seek refuge in the Buddhas who protect the world, who strive to shelter all that lives and, with great strength, eradicate all fears. Likewise, I purely seek refuge in the Dharma. They have realized, clears away the fears of things, and also in the assembly of Bodhisattvas, I, trembling with fear, offer myself to Samandabhata, to Manjughosha also I make a gift of my body, to the protectors of Avalokiteshvara, who infallibly acts with compassion, I utter a mournful cry, please protect this miscreant. In my search for refuge, I cry from heart for Aghashagarbha, Shkidigarbha, and all the compassionate protectors. And I seek refuge in the Vajrapani, upon sight of whom all harmful beings, such as the messengers of death, flee in terror in all directions. Previously I transgressed all your advice, but now, upon seeing this great fear, I go to you for refuge. By doing so, may this fear be swiftly cleared away, for I need to comply with the doctor's advice. When frightened by a common illness, then how much more so when perpetually diseased by the unmanifold agitations of desire and so forth. And if all people living on this earth can be overcome by just one of these, and if no other medicine can cure them, is to be found elsewhere in the universe, then the intention not to act in accordance with the advice of the all-knowing physicians can uproot every misery is extremely bewildered and worthy of scorn. If I need to be careful near a small ordinary precipice, then how much more so near the one of deep duration that drops for 1,000 miles. It is inappropriate to enjoy myself, thinking that today alone I shall not die, for inevitably the time will come when I shall become nothing. Who can grant me fearlessness? How can I be surely freed from this? If I shall inevitably become nothing, how can I relax and enjoy myself? What remains with me now from the terminated experience of the past? Yet, through my great attachment to them, I have been going against my spiritual master's advice. Having departed from this life and from all my friends and relatives, if all alone I must go elsewhere, what is the use of making friends and enemies? How can I be surely freed from the unwholesome, the source of misery continuously, night and day? I should only consider this. Whatever has been done by me through ignorance and unknowing, be it the breaking of a vow or deed by nature wrong, I humbly confess it all in the presence of the protectors, with folded hands, prostrating myself, and again, my mind terrified by the misery to come. I beseech all the guides of the world to please accept my transgression and wrongs, since these are not good. In the future I shall do them no more. Gladly do I rejoice in the virtues that relieves the misery of all those unfortunate states and that gives happiness to the suffering. I rejoice in that gathering of virtue that is the cause of the Arhat's awakening. I rejoice in the definite freedom of embodied creatures from the misery of cycling existence. I rejoice in the awakening of the Buddhas and also in the spiritual levels of their children. And with gladness I rejoice in the ocean of virtues for developing the awakening mind that wishes all beings to be happy, as well as in the deeds that bring them benefit. With folded hands I beseech the Buddhas of all directions to shine the lamp of Dharma for all bewildered in misery's gloom. With folded hands I beseech the... and so forth. So visualize all the objects of refuge complete for generating bodhicitta, and also try to understand the benefits of bodhicitta and so as the witness we have the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the objects of refuge, and having gained certitude in the teaching of the Buddha, so the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have progressed along the paths and attained their realizations and enlightenment by dedicating themselves for the benefit of others. So until I reach enlightenment, you are also making a pledge to engage in the Bodhisattva practices or by cultivating bodhicitta. Just as, so the verses that you are going to recite are just as the previous Sugatas gave birth to the awakening mind, and just as they successively dwelt in the Bodhisattva practices, likewise for the sake of all that lives do I give birth to an awakening mind, and likewise shall I too successively follow the practices. So these two verses you should recite 3 times. Just as the previous bodhisattvas, please repeat, gave birth to an awakening mind, and just as they successively dwelt in the bodhisattva practices, likewise for the sake of all that lives do I give birth to an awakening mind, and likewise shall I too successfully follow the practices. So please repeat again, just as the previous bodhisattvas gave birth to an awakening mind, and just as they successfully dwelt in the bodhisattva practices, likewise for the sake of all that lives do I give birth to an awakening mind, and likewise shall I too successfully follow the practices. So repeat again, just as the previous Sugatas give birth to an awakening mind, and just as they successfully dwelled in the Bodhisattva practices, likewise for the sake of that all that lives do I give birth to an awakening mind, and likewise shall I too successfully follow the Bodhisattva practices. So in this very auspicious or extraordinary place, sacred place, we have this opportunity to go through the teaching, the book, and also generate bodhicitta. And generate bodhicitta. And so let's continue reading the text from verse number 25. In order to further increase it from now on, those with discernment who have lucidly seized an awakening mind in this way should highly praise it in the following manner. Today my life has borne fruit, having well obtained this human existence. I have been born into the family of Buddhas, and now am I Buddha's children. Thus, whatever actions I do from now on must be in accord with the family. Never shall I disgrace or pollute this noble and unsullied race. Just like a blind man discovering a jewel in a heap of rubbish, likewise, by some coincidence, an awakening mind has been born within me. It is the supreme ambrosia that overcomes the sovereignty of death. It is the inexhaustible treasure that eliminates all poverty in the world. It is the supreme medicine that quells the world's disease. It is the tree that shelters all beings, wandering and tired on the path of the conditioned existence. It is the universal bridge that leads to freedom from unhappy states of birth. It is the dawning moon of the mind that dispels the torments of disturbing conceptions. It is the great sun that finally removes the misty ignorance of the world. It is the quintessential butter from the churning of the milk of Dharma for all those guests traveling on the path of conditioned existence who wish to experience the bounties of happiness. This will satisfy them with joy and actually place them in supreme bliss. Today, in the presence of the protectors, I invite the worlds to be guests, and at the festival of temporary and ultimate delight, may our gods, anti-gods, and all be joyful. So at the end of this third chapter, it says, today I invite all the worlds of Sugathahood and temporary happiness. May the gods, Asuras and others rejoice in the presence of all the protectors. So having attained a higher rebirth and passing through higher rebirths for the sake of happiness and joy, well-being for all sentient beings, I call upon all sentient beings to this feast of temporary and the ultimate happiness. So all sentient beings here become your guests. As the prayer says, may the gods, Asuras and others rejoice in the presence of the protectors. So they are all. You cannot consider them as adversaries harming you and sending negative influences towards you and so forth. When you actually practice bodhicitta, so by reciting wrathful mantras and doing all kinds of practices to crush these so-called evil beings, it will help no one. So today we have generated bodhicitta by saying, just as the previous Buddhas and so forth have awakening, generated this mind and have also engaged in the Bodhisattva practices and so forth. Likewise, I'll do so. So when you really have this sense of altruism towards others, all these beings, whom you may consider as your enemies, adversaries, and so forth, becomes your friends. And so accordingly, they will you as their friend. One Kadamba master was actually said to have been certain spirits, bad spirits, were thinking actually of harming that master. And then it was known that these beings, these so-called evil beings, spirits and so forth, had said that this guy actually was thinking of benefiting all sentient beings, including ourselves. How can we actually harm him? And so this is really true. If from your own side, if you could weaken this selfish attitude and also see everything around you as like an illusion, then this is the best means to befriend others, make others your friends. So if you remain rather grumpy and always showing a serious face to others, then of course you will expel them from you. So if you remain very altruistic and compassionate towards others, and others would befriend you, be your friends. With smile, they'll invite you. And so with the practice of Bodhisattva, you will turn others into your friends. So this is what the Kadamba master actually showed. Today, in the presence of all the protectors, I invite the worlds to the guests, to be guests at the festival of the Sukha, the hut, and the ultimate delight. May a temporary and ultimate delight, may gods, anti-gods, and all be joyful. So today I invite the world to the Sukha, the hut, and temporal happiness. May gods, asuras, and others rejoice in the presence of all protectors.